us this morning.
Thanks very much for welcoming me into the space. I've been looking forward to sharing with you my particular journey, which, as you heard, began in South Africa, 1957. And when I'm here having an opportunity to express thoughts and feelings, I never forget the fact that growing up in South Africa, this was not always true. As a child, I was surrounded by strict censorship, and it was quite clear in the culture I grew up in that you could not express your feelings about the government or about any policies that were taking place, because people sometimes were detained without trial for long periods of time, and sometimes people disappeared altogether. So even going to a party or a gathering, that there was an understanding that you had to watch what you said, because there might be somebody amongst you who was a government authority, and there was always a sense of walking on eggshells. So when I first had an opportunity to come to this country, and I came on an American Field Service, I don't know if you know, have you heard of that? It's an exchange program. I'm not sure whether it still exists or not. But I had an opportunity to do a year of high school in 1976 at a high school here in Glendale, California. And I was just amazed to hear people speaking out about what they thought, whom they loved in the political world, who they hated, even challenging teachers in the classroom. Unbelievable to me. It was really a culture shock. What did you say? It's gone to the other extreme?
It's grown to a new height.
And I cherish that very much, that ability to speak freely. And it was only until recently that I began to realize that I was starting to get a similar feeling of walking on eggshells in our culture recently that I had when I was back in South Africa, that I started having some experiences that were quite troubling. I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist for 36 years. And just within this past year, just to give an example, I actually was fired for the first time ever by 3 different people who brought up a political issue one way or another. And of course, as a therapist, I never express my opinions and say, oh, I think this guy is terrible or this one is wonderful. I just explore what they're feeling and what it means to them, and I try to help them connect it to their own background. And I had 3 people in the past year tell me, make what I like to call a lazy assumption. Why? Because instead of jumping on their bandwagon and saying, of course, I understand that you would never date a person who would vote for that guy, that's not what I do as a therapist, right? I explore what they're going through. So just because I didn't jump on the bandwagon immediately, whether it comes to climate change or political candidates, I stayed in my neutral therapeutic position, and I received a text saying, I can see you don't share the same worldview as I do. As much as you helped me tremendously in my life, I will no longer be seeing you.
Wow.
Yeah, I found this extremely troubling. And I couldn't process it either. Usually what we do in cases like that, we say, would you like to come in, we'll talk it through, maybe this, no, I'm done. And of course, all of you have probably, you know of people whose families have fallen apart, people can't talk to each other, people who are having trouble listening to anything other than what they already believe and that's what I consider a state of indoctrination, as opposed to a state of education. Education is when we're willing to learn from a range of different sources. Indoctrination is when we have narrowed ourselves down to one legitimate source, and that's it. And anybody who challenges that, we get rid of them. So as I was searching for different sources to try and come to terms with this and pass it on, because it's, as you'll discover, it's very important to me, this issue, because of what happened to me in South Africa, I came across the beautiful song which you all know, Min Hametza Karatia, Yaneni Memerchavya. And it just hit me. Oh, there it is. I've sung that song for years. Min Hametza Karatia, Yaneni said, okay, what is this narrow place? Mina Meitzar. And I started to think to myself that narrow place could be understood. Of course, as Jews, we know there are always many, many ways to understand everything. Right? But I started to think of Minha Meitzar as the narrow place. And interestingly, the word tsar, I think you probably all know, and I apologize to the rabbis and Kansas here who know a lot more than I do, but I love the stuff. So tsar, meitzar, tsar is a problem, right? Tsarot, or problems. So it's kind of interesting. You say, Mina meitzar, from the narrow places, you might say there is suffering in the narrow places. V'yaneni memencha yad, and we're speaking to the Great One, to God. We were answered from the divine expanse. And I frankly got very excited. I thought to myself, wow, there's this divine expanse which is beyond the narrow place, beyond just what we happen to have decided is true, or what our particular biases are, or what our egos are telling us. It's a place that's bigger than that. And I thought to myself that might be quite a beautiful way to try to be a part of a process that helps people return to a more open state. I do want to say from the get-go, because I'm going to develop this quite a bit, that at the same time that I say that, I want to go on record as saying I think there are times, I like to say there are times to be a bridge, and there are times to be a wall. There are times where we have to draw a line. And like the joke goes, keep your mind open, but not so open that your brains fall out. So there are times where we have to say, no, this is where we draw the line. But what I want to get into today is how we do that. And I want to suggest to you that therapists in my community, spiritual leaders in your community, that maybe we can learn something about how we do that, so that we don't contribute to the polarization and the dehumanization that's going on in this country. And quite frankly, I think it's potentially dangerous. When I think of this situation these days, I'm always reminded of that wonderful moment in that Apollo 13 movie. I think it was astronaut John Swigert. He says those wonderful words, Houston, we have a problem. It's chilling, right? And frankly, I think to myself, America, we have a problem. We have a problem. And what are we going to do as Jews, as psychotherapists, as spiritual leaders, as human beings out in the world? What are we going to do? Are we going to add to the contempt, to the polarization? Or are we going to try to find ways to do what our forefather Abraham did, which is to bring people into the tent? Fantastic story, right? Abraham actually left his conversation with Hashem, with God, to bring strangers into the tent. That's such a powerful lesson. It's difficult to do, and I'm going to talk a bit today about why it's difficult to do. So, 1 second. I left something in my pocket that I want to share with you. So I was born in South Africa in 1957. And I was given this document, which reads as follows. I made a large copy for you so you can try and see what it says. And it says, Arnold Bloch is classified as a white person. See this? It comes out of that paper. It's classified as a white person, as opposed to being classified black or colored, which was the mixed race of those people who had crossed the color line illegally in South Africa. So, receiving this document entitled me to the services of a poorly paid black maid, 6 days a week, who cleaned up after me, cooked my food, did the laundry, and while outside, a poorly paid black man tended to the garden. Every day there were signs clearly indoctrinating me, as I now think, into the idea that whites were superior to black people, and that having a white skin was superior to any other color. Everywhere I looked, black people had to drink from separate drinking fountains. Black people sat on separate park benches. Black people attended separate inferior schools. Black people were given inferior medical care in inferior hospitals. Black children were forbidden from swimming in our local town swimming pool. Black people were forbidden from most of the beautiful beaches in South Africa. And this is the painful part for me. I know that I was quite kind, and in fact my Hebrew name is Chanon, which is derived from Chen. My dad was a rabbi. So the family myth goes that when I was a little boy, I think I was about 5 or 6, I attended a birthday party and spent the entire party with the blind boy inside, while all the other children played outside. Now I don't tell you that just to say what a good boy am I, but to say that tells me that I had a big open heart and I cared. And only, say 10 years later, at the age of 15, if I saw a black man being slapped across the head or in his face by his boss or master, I immediately assumed that he deserved it. He must have done something to upset the black, we used to call them a boss or master. And that was the beginning of that's how deep the indoctrination was. I didn't know it then, but I actually had come to see black people as inferior and deserving of punishment if necessary. Our black maid had a room attached to the garage outside, which was common in South Africa. And by the way, what I'm about to share with you is a realization that only came to me because I've been working on these issues. That's how, when you're indoctrinated, you don't really know that you're indoctrinated. But I recently realized, I was thinking about the fact that this candle burned in her room outside,